I would like to bring our cyber panel up now. Please welcome to the stage Nicole Darden Ford and Kevin Tierney to continue the discussion. I'm going to see if I can do a little better from this side. So welcome and thank you for being here today.
Good morning.
So they wanted me to open with some statements, but after listening to Chris talk, I don't have any opening statements. It's like he covered so many wonderful things. I think as business leaders, and everyone in this room, we're a business leader, right? We have to represent the opportunity, but also we need to represent the risk in the conversations that we take. And I know that in my own journey around cyber, it's gone from being, well, let's just let the IT team take care of that, to a maturation of our thinking to understanding that this is an enterprise risk that can take us down reputationally as well as financially and legally. And so it becomes something that really permeates every conversation that we have, digital transformation just being one of them. So could you both talk about how software is now the business, right? How that affects your companies and how you manage cyber risks, or how you bring the cyber topic into the conversation in a relevant way to, let's say, achieve the objectives you've been given.
Start with me?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and great to be with you on this topic. And I think the director covered so much of this, so we'll try to build on that. I talked a little bit last night about the journey the GM's on from a technology perspective, and almost everything that we're doing is leveraging digital technology, whether it's how we're developing vehicles or how we're trying to move to zero emissions and zero congestion, autonomous vehicles, et cetera. And so cybersecurity's had to be at the core of that. And unfortunately, I have a leadership team that really understands that and has been a key driver in that journey. You don't get to cybersecurity proficiency overnight, and even when you think you're there, you're just starting on another path. But they've been supportive of kind of bringing that along through the company and really making it, as you mentioned, a business risk, not necessarily an IT or a technical risk, but how we're doing just business in general and how we have to look at cybersecurity, regardless of whether it's a technology piece, a software piece, an M&A piece we talked about last night. Almost everything that's happening in the company, you have to consider cyber as a core part of it. And so it's a fun thing. I look across almost everything in the whole company because there's nothing that doesn't involve some sort of digital piece these days. So
cyber and fun don't usually end up in the same sentence, Kevin. But
you got to have a little fun.
Watch that.
Otherwise, we can't solve that talent problem.
So just talk quickly. Talk about the 3 zeros that you mentioned last night and cyber, like how they apply, or how you kind of bring cyber into the conversation of the 3 zeros.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 zeros are how we're advancing technology in the transportation systems, and every one of those innovations is based on software and connectivity, and so that's bringing technology into the vehicle platform like never before. We do have a history of it. I talked a little bit last night. We have a history of innovation. We actually launched OnStar in our vehicles in 1996. So maybe one of the first IoT devices maybe out there, but it's tremendously changed since then. And so everything that we're doing is all about connectivity, about software, and the vehicle is no more this static thing that goes off the assembly line. It's a living, breathing thing that's evolving and changing and performing better, and that's all based on data. But it has to be backstopped with strong security, because if any of that gets compromised, it's going to potentially affect the safety of the customer, the privacy of the customer, and of course, the image of the company. And so we just, we can't allow that. We look at security and safety as really synonymous.
Mm-hmm. Nicole, so for you at Rockwell, right? Last night you were telling me a little bit about, we were a hardware company. We're now a software and solutions company. So what does the world look like through your lens in terms of working with your business partners?
So I first want to say that, Rockwell has invested heavily in cybersecurity. I mean, we live cybersecurity. When you think about, we're an industrial automation company, as well as I consider us a digital transformation company as well, right? Not just for ourselves, but for our customers. The things that we do and the way in which we guide and lead our customers, I think, is important. And so cyber is something that not only we believe in, but we're also advising our customers on their cybersecurity journey. And I think that that's important. I mean, the risk is real, right? Cybersecurity, as Chris said, we should democratize cyber. And the reason why is because everybody has a role to play. We're a manufacturer as well. We're focused on making sure that we're defending and protecting our own organization, but we're also taking the lessons that we've learned and we're expanding it and applying it to our customers. And I think that that's critical. Is really, we're an iconic 100-year company that has a ton of experience in this space. How do we leverage it and utilize it to support our customer base and really to impact the manufacturing space, which I think is critically important for us. So Rockwell is a company that I think has spent the time, and we're not just talking the talk, but we're walking the walk, right? We're investing in spaces like cybersecurity, and specifically, thank you. Specifically, we have hired a chief product security officer. I think that was an important investment for us because, you know, secure by design principles are extremely important when you're talking about designing in software, right? So now we have a cadre along, you know, just not the chief private CPSO, but also his staff and security liaisons that are embedded in our business. They're really focused on making sure that we're following secure coding practices and that we're leveraging software in the way that we should to make sure that we're protecting our customers. That is an important investment. The other thing we did is, as a part of our M&As, we purchased software companies, right? And so they're bringing practices to bear that are safe and secure. So really, it really extends past, you know, Rockwell's endeavor, but we're looking at our customers and how we can impact their journey and be a part of that journey.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading your bio and some of the things that you said, you know, before today, I had never heard of an organization creating this chief product security officer. And I thought it was like, it makes perfect sense in today's world, especially for a business like yours where, you know, your security risks are into your customers' environments, right? So having someone that can work across the entire product lifecycle to me makes perfect sense. Where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we weren't even thinking this way, right? That's how much the landscape has changed in such a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Kevin, you've mentioned before software-defined vehicle. Tell us a little bit about what that really means and you know how it's influencing the way GM thinks about the future.
Yeah, so, well, you talked about 000 and updates and things like that. Vijay showed the picture of the Ultify platform early on. And so, you know, modern cars are really, you know, some people say it's a computer on wheels. It's really a data center on wheels. I mean, there's 150 different computers, networked, you know, multiple networks, different protocols, and all connected to the cloud or to infrastructure. And so that's been that way for a while. What the software-defined vehicle means to us is that now that vehicle can change over time. It used to be in the past, it was more about delivering content, making changes maybe to fix issues or resolve recalls. Now it's how do we make that vehicle really live through the life cycle? Maybe add new content, increase performance like I mentioned, of course fix issues, and even from a security perspective I can now resolve vulnerabilities over the air instead of maybe in the past where we had to just deal with things or you know, maybe do things in the service center. We can actually provide those updates to the customer. So, you know, if anyone's talking about software-defined vehicle, it's really our new look at where the vehicle is going. And a lot of that new technology is there to develop autonomous and semi-autonomous driving capability. You have to think about all the computing and updates that are required there, as well as, you know, all the new applications that are coming along with that. So we're really trying to position the vehicle to be ready and grow into the future.
Which is an expectation that's kind of other industries are kind of shaping for us in terms of customer expectations, right? It's swapping out, you know, the piece of the hardware isn't a necessity to get a new piece of functionality,
right?
And now applying it to the vehicle space. Nicole, how about for Rockwell in terms of manufacturing processes? A lot of automation, a lot of instrumentation. You talked about the role of the Chief Product Security Officer, but so, you know, how is that changing the way the business thinks about the future and also the kind of the relationship you have with the customer?
So certainly when you look at a manufacturing floor today, the shop floor, you now see that there are more connected devices. So that is a paradigm shift that I think was necessary, especially as we try to drive more efficiencies and operational excellence in our manufacturing environment. But it also caused risk. And again, when you think about the shop floor is normally a closed environment. It's not necessarily, we're not necessarily supposed to defend it in the same way we would defend an IT environment. But now we have to. The connected ecosystem or connected enterprise is a real thing. And we're going to continue to see stress and pressure as we start to connect more devices. Again, vulnerabilities that exist there, because it was a closed environment, no problem. But now today, because we're connecting these devices, we now have to have a strategy, an OT strategy, not just an IT strategy. And that's what's different today than a few years ago. Rockwell started our journey about 3 to 4 years ago, our OT strategy. And the reason why was because we saw some unprecedented attacks in the OT space, which was a big, big challenge. At that time, we had to ask ourselves questions around what would happen if we had a disruption? What would we do, right? Not having the strategy made us a little uncomfortable. And so we started our journey, and we did a few things, right? We looked at our architecture on the shop floor to decide, hey, how would we make this more resilient? We started to make some decisions around funding and created a business case. And then we executed on that business case. And part of it was ring fencing, segmentation, and then, really protecting the assets on the shop floor. That was so important for us, right? We can now take that information and all the lessons learned, and now we sell those services to our customers. Because we, as an industrial manufacturer, 100-year-old company, have so much to bring to the space. So that's really kind of changing the paradigm. I think that CISOs now, along with CIOs and plant engineering teams, have to work together to come up with a strategy on how to protect the shop floor. Because the manufacturing sector is the second most targeted sector by the threat actors. They figured out where to go and how to get into organization, and it's through the shop floor. And so diligence is really what I think we need to be focused on, creating resilient systems, making sure you have a solid strategy, and really kind of democratizing this notion of security. Not just for large companies like ours, we have great funding, but for small and medium-sized companies that really need support in this space as well.
I love it. It's almost a defense to offensive strategy, right? Because you've taken it out and you can work with your customers, and builds more stickiness, more loyalty, because you're helping them with the key risk and they're learning off the back, so to a certain extent, off the investments that Rockwell has made.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's stay on the topic of supply chain, right? Supply chain is a huge topic right now with some of the geopolitical changes. How are you thinking about the cyber element of this as we see what's going on in Ukraine, the tensions around Taiwan? How is that changing maybe things that come into the conversation now that a year ago weren't? Nicole, we're going to start with you on this.
Such an interesting topic, right? So the world gets smaller, right? Globalization has made the world much smaller. But when you think about it, now we have countries really internalizing how we're going to do business moving forward. So what does that mean? From a cybersecurity perspective, we've connected everything, right? We don't have ways of shutting off certain countries or, in some instances, making decisions not to do business with certain countries, like we did with Russia. Rockwell made a decision we were no longer going to do business with companies in Russia. Well, imagine this. When you think about the ecosystem of third, fourth, and fifth parties, well, we may have made that decision, but what about our third or fourth party? Did they make that decision? And will that impact us in other ways? So those are kind of when you think about the murky kind of third party, supply chain risk, it's an area that we need to dig into more, understand who we're doing business with and who our vendors are doing business with, but also it's training and education. We really need to make sure that we're training our third, fourth, and fifth parties on what our expectations are from a cybersecurity perspective and hold them accountable to those responsibilities. And as I stated, it's a small world. When you think about the 7 degrees of separation, that is true as it relates to the supply chain. So it's a big, big challenge. You want to make sure that you're making the right choices and decisions, but it really means leaning into this area and understanding those third, fourth, and fifth parties.
Yeah, that's challenging, right? Because you don't necessarily have your own direct interactions with them. You only see things that flow downstream with you. Yeah. So, Kevin, I've got a question for you. The last panel up here talked a little bit about, we asked a question about how do you make the decision for build by partner, right? And, there was a time around software where it was a cost and efficiency play, right? We did a lot of work and we sent it over to places like India, lower cost markets, because we were just trying to, shrink the cost as much as possible. Well, that world is gone. We're now in Vijay's era of every company is a software company. And so there's this concept that people talk about now is about software development, in-house software development and shifting left, right? Moving all the way up to the beginning of the creation process. How does that affect your role in your conversations at General Motors?
Yeah, so it's a top focus for me, and it actually dovetails into the supply chain risk as well, because no matter how much we become a software company, we're still going to have third-party software, and so it's really taking a step back and understanding what are we going to be responsible for, and then what are the third parties going to be responsible for, and making sure that we have a cohesive process for tying those together and securing those software bundles together, because it might not be two separate things. It could be all integrated into one. And so we really have to understand that from a product perspective, also a technology perspective, what we deploy in our plants. We within GM, we really kind of split into three domains: the IT domain, the IoT domain, which is the vehicle, and then the OT domain, which is the plant. And so we have leaders over each of those areas, but there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of areas that we have to partner on. And so a lot of it's getting the processes to now be more cross-functional. So it used to be in the past, those groups may not have talked a lot to each other. So now, how do we connect those development processes, and how do we make sure that we are considering security from the very start? That goes into making sure that we're using maybe common software development processes, common tool sets, we have common strategies, but we're also risk dependent. So there's not a one-size-fits-all to each of those areas. We look at the threats, we look at the risks, and then we deploy the right control strategies, also taking into account the constraints. So you can do different things in an IT system versus an OT system versus a vehicle. Maybe you wish it could all be the same, but the real world has a lot of different constraints and challenges. And so we have to take all that into account through the development cycle. And as you might imagine, a vehicle takes many years to develop and then has to live for many years. And so we have to really do that from the start. So before we even start procuring parts for a vehicle, we have to have all the security strategies set, because we have to send that out to the dev teams or to the suppliers or whoever's building the systems, and we have to know ahead of time what we're doing. And that has to live through that development cycle, through the production cycle, and through that lifetime, which could be 15 or 20 years.
So does that look like a playbook? Does that look like the equivalent of what brand standards are for a company? I mean, what does that look like that you send out to the development teams at the beginning of what they're doing?
So from a vehicle perspective, it's a set of requirements. Basically software requirements. So here's the security controls. Here's how we want them to be implemented. Here's the security key material. Here's how we're going to handle. Pretty much 1 to Z on here's all the things that you need to implement. And that is somewhat customized depending again on the component and the risk. So it is highly dependent on what the system is or what the function is. But that's all defined up front, and that's provided out to those teams. And then we have a series of checkpoints along that development process. And depending on what you're doing, if you're developing software, that could be daily checks and parts of the actual DevSecOps sort of process. If it's a supplied part, it might be a little less often, where we come in and do different assessments and maybe penetration testing towards the end. But they're all this is all baked into the vehicle development process now. And that's something that we took on, probably almost a decade ago, putting this into how we develop our vehicles.
Okay, all good business leaders need to, have, the contact lenses that allow you to focus one eye on the here and now and one eye on the horizon. Here's your chance. Nicole, we'll start with you. As you think about your role, your challenges, your conversations and strategies over the next 5 years, what are you thinking about on the horizon?
Oh gosh, so many things here. Certainly, I think nation-state attacks will continue. I think geopolitically, you have countries and they're going to use cyber as a differentiator for them. Attribution is tough, right? So it's a really good way for them to kind of get a leg up on their competition. So
and prosecution is even tougher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've seen that, right? So that's going to definitely is a challenge. I think when you think about ransomware as a service, the threat actors and the cyber criminals now have made this a business, right? So, and they're profiting off of it. So it's not going to stop. It's just going to it's going to change. It's going to morph. We're going to see we need more adaptable systems, self-healing systems as a result, and resilience is really the key. I think that we'll continue to see, we'll see more sophisticated attacks just across the board, across multiple sectors. When you look at the threat actors, especially let's talk about nation states, there are criteria. You can kind of see the traits and attributes from different cyber attacks. So you know that Russia's very loud and noisy, even the way that they're handling this Ukraine war. That's how they handle their cyber attacks. Whereas China is more strategic, right? And they're more intentional about what they're going after. And it's just interesting to see that we now have this intelligence. We have to use it as an offensive so that we can play offense and not just defense. I think you have to play both. So that's kind of what I see. I see, quantum computing changing the game. We're right now, we're seeing that even in identity, we're seeing MFA used to be rock solid. Now it's not. So this constant evolution of the cyber threat landscape and our ability to stay on top of what's going to occur next, that's really the challenge for us.
Okay. Kevin, how about for you?
Yeah, those are all great answers. In my conversations with the director, he's mentioned that we're on the front lines and we might not know of an issue before they do, frankly. And that scares me quite a bit, that we're the ones that might be seeing the big attack for the first time. I think it's going to take closer partnership with the government to make sure that we really understand what's out there and what's actionable. They're not just opaque threats and we're just guessing. We really need to have better intelligence. But I think we as a country, we have to become more resilient to these sort of attacks in general. You mentioned small and medium-sized businesses. That's where we see a lot of our activity. Our companies have enough resources to secure our environment, but then the vendors we depend on often don't. And even if we work with them and give them requirements and whatever, it's still often not enough. And so that's been a conversation I've been having a lot with our government partners, is what can we do to bring everyone along, because it's somewhat the weakest link that's going to be the problem for everyone.
And sometimes that weak link is just the innovation that the business needs for the next competitive advantage, right?
Well, it could be the big innovation. It could frankly be the most uninteresting piece, but it's a linchpin in delivering whatever you're delivering. And so we have to consider that. And oftentimes those smaller vendors, they cross sectors. So it might not be just one thing. It goes across many of the critical infrastructure sectors. And so you could have kind of a big cascading event there. So I think we have to look better at our common intersection points, systems approach, where are the interfaces, because oftentimes it's those touch points, the things that cross, multiple companies and sectors that could be our biggest vulnerabilities.
Okay. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience, so if you've got questions for our panelists. And I see a hand right over here.
Question was how much is corporate espionage in your strategies and plans?
I mean, very much so. I mean, we call it insider threat. It's something you have to consider, especially when you're operating globally, but it doesn't really matter. It can happen here in the US. And, basically what we're doing is we're doing a lot of user behavior analytics. So looking at how users are operating on the network and what they're accessing and what they're doing, and potentially raising red flags associated with that. So it is a key concern. It's real. It's still a small percentage, but especially from an intellectual property theft perspective, it's a key risk.
What's interesting is it's a huge, huge risk for us as an organization, and it was really, to be honest, it was the impetus for building the cybersecurity program at Rockwell, was because of insider threat and what we were seeing. So it continues to be top of mind for us because, again, competitive advantage, and there's so much competition out here that it's always a tier 1 cybersecurity risk for us. It's something we're watching.
I see a hand back here.
Hi, my question is around quantum computing. So if you really think about it, the computers are becoming faster. Supercomputers are coming in. Quantum compute is on the horizon, and what I was hearing and reading about is that cyber threats are coming from the perspective that a lot of data is already being captured by all the dark actors and waiting for quantum computers to come in so that they can, decrypt. Because today, if you take the regular encryption algorithms, it takes a very long time to decrypt, so actually that's really what it is. But quantum computers come in and all this data is getting stored, and that's the time, the attack will happen in a few years' time. So I just wanted to understand from your organization perspective, given the mission critical kind of, products that you're rolling out and it's all pervasive, have you started thinking about how to protect against that? Or is it something that comes up in discussions? Or is it just like, something that we should not worry about? I just wanted your perspectives on that.
You want to start? You mentioned it. Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely. We do talk about it, and what we've done is we've gone through all of our security controls and different cryptographic algorithms and mechanisms, and identified which are the ones that are most susceptible to quantum computing, compromise in the future. And then some have actually a longer life than you think, even with the introduction of quantum computing. So we've started that, and we've also been following, NIST is doing some bake-offs of technology, and then getting compromised as quickly. So, it really remains to be seen where that's going to go. We see it as this kind of 5 to 10 year horizon that we just have to keep ahead of. But to my earlier comment about vehicle lifetimes, we're really mindful of that. So we're trying to bake in, mechanisms that are more resilient to quantum computing. I think I'm a little less concerned about, a nation-state attack on a bunch of information that's stored for my products per se, but other industries, that could be a huge issue. So I totally understand.
Yeah, I think it's something that is top of mind, but more so to just try to figure out strategies around it and understand our susceptibility to it, right? And where we really need to focus. So that's kind of what my team is doing, is really thinking about areas where quantum computing can impact us, and then starting to look for technologies or other options to kind of counteract it. So yeah, it's certainly something we're thinking about.
Good. Well, that's all we have time for today. Please join me in thanking Nicole and Kevin for their comments today. Thank you.